So thanks so much, you guys, for being here today. If anybody had suggested 15 years ago that I would be sitting here in front of all of you, I would have said they're totally nuts. I was in business school on a full scholarship, about to graduate as the top woman in my class, and I was being recruited by Enron. I wasn't a foodie. I traded the briefcase for a diaper bag, and we had 4 children in just over 5 years. I dismissed this entire movement as some hippie thing or lifestyle, the rich and famous. I was busy, like most parents are, feeding my kids, trying to, and I didn't want anybody telling me what to eat or what to feed my family. And then one of my children got really sick, and one of my sons got very sick. And suddenly I started looking at the statistics of disease in this generation of children. And I learned that there had been a 265% increase in the rate of hospitalizations related to food allergic reactions. I learned that the U.S. consumes 83% of the world's ADHD medication. I then went on to learn from the Centers for Disease Control that cancer is the leading cause of death by disease in children under the age of 15. And as a mother of 4 children, I didn't want to know any of that. And as I started to pay attention to what I was feeding my children, because our youngest child had food allergies, I suddenly realized that there were ingredients in the food that we were feeding our children that weren't in the food that I had eaten as kids. And as I started to learn about these things called GMOs, I thought, what are they? I hadn't even heard of them. Have I been living under a rock? And yet at the same time, I realized that unfortunately most Americans had absolutely no idea that these things had been introduced into our foods in the 1990s. And one of the growing concerns over the introduction of genetically engineered ingredients into the food supply was the concern around allergenicity. There were protocols put in place, but there were no models that could definitively test whether or not these new proteins were going to trigger an allergic reaction. And so when the first genetically engineered ingredients were introduced in 1994, it was in our dairy. And correlation isn't causation, but the most common allergy in the U.S. is a cow milk allergy. And so I turned to food allergy organizations and to some of these doctors, and I said, as a kid with a milk allergy, is he allergic to the milk we all grew up drinking? Or is he actually allergic to these genetically engineered ingredients that we began introducing in the 1990s? And some of these food allergy organizations and doctors, they kind of had an allergic reaction to me. And that's when I learned who was funding food allergy research. And that a lot of these chemical corporations, these agricultural corporations who were telling us that these foods were safe were the same ones that were funding the research. And as I began to look further into what was going on with the health of our children, with the health of our families, I realized, like Sarah had mentioned, that we were essentially part of this very large human experiment, and that as parents we hadn't been given the right to know what we were feeding our children. And I didn't want to know any of it. But at the same time, I couldn't unlearn this information. And I realized that while none of us could do everything, all of us could do something. And that each one of us has the ability to affect remarkable change. Each one of us has something that we are uniquely good at. It's why you're here. And when you leverage that with something that you're passionate about, you can create extraordinary change. And it's going to happen at all different levels, and it's going to happen in unanticipated, unexpected, remarkable ways. But I want to invite all of you to do what you can where you are with what you have. Because to me, the fact that we have a generation of children that has earned the nickname Generation RX is something that we have to address. Because while the kids only represent 30% of the population, they represent 100% of the future of our country. And if they are too sick to perform in school, if they are too sick to perform in the military, if they are too sick to perform and contribute to our economy, the health and future of our country may very well be at stake. And so to me, there is nothing more patriotic that we could be doing than asking for the right to know what's in our food, so that we can protect the health of the American children. So thank you for being here today, and we really look forward to the questions you guys are going to pose later.